All right, today we're jumping into a massive debate in political philosophy. It's one that pits two totally different ways of thinking about justice against each other. You've got the architects, trying to draw up a blueprint for a perfect world, and then you have the firefighters who are just trying to save the world we actually live in. So let's get into the big question at the heart of it all.
And really, it all comes down to this one huge question. When you look around and you see these deep, ongoing injustices, what's the best way to go about fixing things? I mean, where do you even start? And look, this is not some abstract academic game. As our source material makes painfully clear, these non-ideal realities are everywhere. Racism that just won't go away, systemic discrimination, economic inequality, these are the real-world problems that philosophers are trying to solve. This is the backdrop for the entire debate.
Okay, so let's dive into the first approach. You can think of it as the architect's blueprint for a just society. In philosophy, this is what's known as ideal theory.
So the big idea here, and this was really pushed by the famous philosopher John Rawls, is that before you can fix our messy reality, you need a clear vision of what you're even aiming for. Makes sense, right? You can't just start building a better house without a blueprint. So ideal theory begins by imagining a perfectly just world.
And this is where we see the key difference. Ideal theory makes this massive simplifying assumption. Rawls called it full compliance. It basically pretends we live in a world where everyone agrees to follow the rules of justice. The source uses a great analogy. It's like physics deciding to ignore friction just to make the basic laws of motion super clear. But non-ideal reality? Well, that's the real world, with all the friction, all the injustice, and people not following the rules.
Now, it's really important to get this. For the people who back ideal theory, this isn't about running away from reality. Not at all. It's about creating a North Star, a clear, ambitious target that can guide our political actions and help us figure out how to move forward from the very messy world we're in today. But, and this is a big but, a whole school of critics looks at this and basically says, "Are you kidding me? You're sitting there drawing up blueprints while the house is literally on fire?" This is where things get heated. And this really cuts to the core of the problem they see. The biggest worry is that by focusing so much on some perfect imaginary world, ideal theory just detaches us. It alienates us from the very real, very painful suffering of people dealing with injustice right now.
So the critique really boils down to two main problems. First, there's the distraction charge. Focusing on a fantasy world is just an evasion of the real fight. And second, there's the suppression charge. The idea here is that by always looking forward to a perfect target, ideal theory, totally brushes past the need to look backward and deal with historical injustices, like the call for reparations.
And that burning house metaphor really sums it all up, doesn't it? For the critics, sitting in a philosopher's armchair dreaming up perfect worlds feels like a pretty dangerous luxury when there are real fires of oppression that need to be put out immediately.
Okay, let's bring in a key player in this whole debate, the philosopher Charles Mills. He took this critique and pushed it way further. He basically argued that the problem isn't just that the blueprint is a distraction, it's that the blueprint itself is rotten from the start.
You see, Mills forces us to rethink the entire story we tell ourselves about Western political ideals. The usual story, the hypocrisy narrative, is that, hey, we had these amazing ideals like equality and freedom, we just messed up applying them. But Mills comes in and says, nope, that's not it at all. He argues, from a more structural, Marx-inspired view, that the very ideals themselves were built on a foundation of racial hierarchy.
And he gives it a name, the racial contract. This is his big concept. He's saying that the real, unspoken agreement that's been running modern societies isn't some lofty social contract for everyone. It's an implicit contract among white people to create and maintain a system of global dominance. For Mills, that's the reality, and ideal theory is a smokescreen that helps hide it.
So the big question is this whole tradition of ideal theory just broken? Is it inherently flawed? Mills argues, absolutely, yes, and he lays out some very specific charges to prove it. So here are the 5 big charges Mills levels against this tradition. He says it expresses conscious racist attitudes, it embodies racist assumptions, it represents a privileged whiteness, it obscures and disguises what's really going on, and it gets the diagnosis of racism all wrong, seeing it as just a personal moral issue instead of a systemic one.
Okay, to really get a grip on this, let's focus in on one of these charges. That third one, the idea that a theory can embody a privileged whiteness. What does that actually mean?
Well, Mills's point is that the theory is built from the ground up, from the perspective of a very specific and very small group of people, affluent, white, male professionals. It takes their experiences and their interests and presents them as if they're universal, as if that's just the default human experience. And in doing that, it basically pushes the experiences of everyone else to the side.
But the source material pushes back a little here, asking some tough follow-up questions. For instance, when we see that progress on racial justice is painfully slow, does that automatically prove widespread indifference, like Mills might argue? Or could it be something else, like maybe a deep sense of despair, even among people who care, because the system feels so impossible to change?
And there's another really interesting layer here. The author asks, is whiteness always the most useful way to understand power? Or are there times when things like class or professional status might actually give us a sharper picture of who has power and who doesn't, even when we're talking about racial injustice? It just goes to show how complicated this really is.
So why does any of this matter? I mean, is this just a bunch of philosophers arguing in an ivory tower? Not even close. This debate has massive, real-world consequences.
Yeah, let's be super clear about this. This is not just an academic argument. Think about it. This debate directly shapes how activists frame their demands. It changes how policymakers try to tackle social justice issues. It defines our public conversations about history and reparations. It really gets to the core of whether we should prioritize fixing the damage that's been done or focus all our energy on building a totally new future. Are we firefighters or are we architects? And so, that brings us right back to the central dilemma. To fix our world, do we have to start by imagining a perfect one? Is that blueprint our essential guide? Or does that very act of dreaming blind us to the fires that are burning right at our feet?